interesting that you're here. So for those who don't know, an Olympus launch partner, Jones Dow, who, if you happen
late night,
to
yeah.
remember from about a month ago, we had an AMA with Ice Cream Man and Ultra, who kind of were co-founders at Jones Dow. And the idea of Jones Dow is to take DopeX faults, okay, and then on top of that, other ways that you can hedge, right? So it's built primarily on top of DopeX, but then there's things called perps, which you'll find on GMX, and this is on Arbitrum. And to kind of offload some of the decision-making process when it comes to let's say you have ETH or you have Geom or now DopeX, because now there's 3 on there, and be able to kind of offload some of that responsibility, and you pay a small fee, and the goal is to try and be as neutral as possible. Now, I know that there is also some limitations of DopeX, right? So they're only able to hedge as much as there is liquidity for some of these options because they have to trade against somebody. But it is pretty interesting, I think, for folks who are looking to maybe hold a position. But then there's also some other ways that you'd want to actually use hey, Jason, there's some ways that you'd actually want to use your geom on Jones Dow. So we have Boss Imp, who is one of the strategists, who, quick shout out, also happens to run a DAO called the Imp DAO, which is great. And if you haven't been in that server, it's awesome.
Emojis.
Yeah. Doing some pretty cool degen stuff. We love it. But we're here to talk about Jones Dow. So Boss Imp, maybe kind of walk us through a little bit of Jones and just kind of how folks should be looking at this. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna try. Can I share a screen? Can I do that? Is that something I can do?
Are you
do
shilling?
not think so. I think not. You guys are just shilling your own bags, aren't you?
It'd be a huge Jones Dow bag. Hold on. How do I move Jason to the audience? Hold on. But it's not letting me share a screen. But if you go to jonesdow.io, you can kind of follow along, because I think people in Boston, we talked about this. People aren't really using Jones Dow necessarily the way that they could, right? Like, maybe tell us a little bit more about that, and tell us a little bit about your role there.
Sure. So I'm an option strategist at Jones Dow. I come from a traditional finance background. I worked in IB and in fintech on interest rate products, options, etc. And I've joined, like I said, Jones Dow as an option strategist. So what we do at Jones Dow is we're gonna take deposits in our vaults, and then we're gonna deploy the capital on DOPEX with option strategies aiming at bringing yield to our Joneses. And something that isn't known about Jones is when you deposit in Jones Vault, you get G assets. And with that G asset, you can LP it with the asset. For example, when you deposit OM, you get GOM. You can LP GOM and OM for a nice APR. So you should deposit only half your OM and keep the other half to LP it and earn a nice yield. At the moment, the yield on the Jones.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here. It's 31.59.
31%. So even if like the if the vault is flat or even like doesn't make money, you still make that farming yield, which is interesting because you get that minimum and permanent loss, because we don't plan to like we would like to have 50% return in one epoch on our vault, but we are targeting low risk strategy that will bring good yield, like 1-2%, and that and this is the cherry on top. So you get that yield on your G asset, plus you get the yield of the LP, which is quite interesting, plus the rebases, etc. So I think it's an overall good strategies, and that's it. Most of the people don't deposit the full amount of ohm on the vault and get GOM, and then they're forced to sell their GOM for ohm, etc. So you should only deposit half your amount and get the G asset, and they'll pay it for free.
Yeah.
For free jobs.
Because I mean, I see here there's 722 geom filled. So in the vault, that just locked up. And I think that's interesting that, well, one, we're telling you not to deposit all of your in one place if you're going to use Jones DAO. But so you have a few different profiles, right? So you have your yield profile based on however the options are performing. You have half of that LP'd into this JGOM LP. Now, you mentioned impermanent loss. So JGOM, that's supposed to track the price of ohm pretty closely. Is that right?
Yes, it will track. Basically, you will have the yield earned in GOM. So, for example, if you make 1% on your yield, GOM will be 1.01 ohm. But that will cause really minimal impermanent loss, because for small moves, your permanent loss is negligible. You can forget about it. So yeah,
And
that's
so
pretty
I
much.
think one of the other things that's interesting about this too, I mean, is, because there's a GOM LP, in DopeX, when you deposit, you're locked. Here, if you don't like it, you can kind of just sell. Is that right?
Yeah. You can basically you can get out of the vault at any time and get that yield that you earned in the expected yield based on current price of the strategies we implemented. So if for now like we won 1% based on market moves with our strategy, or 2%, you could exit for that and cash in. So that enables you to not be locked in DOPEX. So even if you want like to do some DOPEX strategy and you don't want to wait the full epoch, etc., you deposit in Jones. We take care of it for you. We make the best strategy out there. We study the best risk reward deals, and with our and then you could just exit whenever you want and have that liquidity, which
Mhm.
is really great, because I think
Yeah.
it's necessary to be able to exit whenever you want, because you have some constraints, or because you have some views on the market, or because you need
Hmm.
cash, or
And then
whatever.
you can
So
take the Jones you earn from that and stake that, and now you've got a few different yield
Bing, bang,
profiles
boom.
too.
We're
yes.
thinking of something. I'm thinking of it like a junion, an onion with many layers with a J.
Like a bloomin' onion or something.
Exactly.
So that's interesting. So obviously that's for, now, do you offer lending yet, or is that coming?
It's coming. So you'll be
Yeah.
able to borrow against your G asset if you want, instead of LPing to take even more risk, or even to leverage on the vault. Why not?
Yeah. Or even another interesting thing could be, ending up in a situation where you take maybe a larger deposit into the vault, and then you've got the J assets to LP, and get more of that farming reward while it's pretty high. I mean, 32 is pretty generous, I think, compared to some of the other vaults that are out there. One thing that I like to do is, I like to look at a couple websites like CoinDix and Multifarm, just to kind of see where the farming opportunities are. I mean, last time we did an education call last month, we had Beats up here. If you actually listened, if you were on that call and you invested in that Beats pool, check the price of Beats. They're pretty crazy right now. They were up to like $1.30. So, don't say we didn't warn you. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities to farm and do things with your GM. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's great.
Can
Shreddy, did
we
you want to add anything there too?
sounds good to me, man. But I did think I want to, in the essence of time, I just want to give everybody else on stage a bit to go. Jason, do you want to talk about Treasury, about the dashboard that's coming out? Any moves for the Olympus
Does
Treasury?
anyone have a
Spell it
mic?
out.
Does anyone have a mic up here? Hi, hello. Hi.
Is this thing on?
Is this thing? Yeah. Hi, hello. Yeah. Um, yeah. I kind of zoned out. You guys were talking about options, right? Just deposit into Jones DAO.
Just
If you
deposit
really,
into Jones now.
yeah, if you really wanted to be beneficial to Jones DAO, you got to like play the opposite, right? They need liquidity. DopeX
No,
needs
but
liquidity.
the other thing is, and just quickly on that, is that, like, the point we're trying to get across is you could deposit some on Jones, but also farm your geom for yield on top. So there was a low yield but a high yield farm, or higher yield farm. I think that's the main.
It's like yield inception.
Exactly.
Yeah, with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But spit us some facts about the treasury, man.
Yeah. So, what about the Treasury? So, we are right now wrapping up the the report for February. The rough numbers that aren't finalized, we got about $34 million, and that was partially because of Olympus Pro, bond revenue, as well as incubator protocols. So, Vesta recently launched, um, and we got 6% of their token supply. It's vested right now. So it's not necessarily in the treasury, but we have 6%, and it's kind of on a contract on their end. I believe it's a 6-month cliff, but linearly vested for 2 years. And right now that's approximately $11 million. Jones wasn't like a full-blown incubator, but it is a partner. They sent over 3%, and that's approximately about like 2 million. And then, we have other vested tokens that we are adding into the treasury report. So we're going to show kind of like the fluctuating price of P butterfly as well as P Klima. Some people don't really realize that we have those. So P butterfly, it represents up to 10% of the total supply, which is bullish, right? We haven't redeemed any of it because it doesn't make any sense. Once V2 launches for the redacted cartel, there's going to be a sort of like supply cap, if you will, and we will essentially redeem at that point. And at that point, we'll just own 10% of the total market cap, which is huge. That's another, right now, I believe, at least 11 million. And then we own, I believe, 4% of the total market cap of Klima, which is about 2.2 million, somewhere in there. So lots of capital coming in, lots of capital growing and things like that. We do have the allocators, like the version 2 of the framework, which will make everything a lot easier to implement and develop in terms of capital deployment. That's under audit, and I think they were supposed to respond to us tomorrow. And then there's like a shit ton of allocators that are being finished up right now that should be done. So the idea is that we're going to launch the Treasury dashboard by the end of next week. We're just pushing as much as possible because we want to show the Treasury growing, versus right now it's maybe operating at 35% capacity. And what I mean by 35% capacity is that per governance, we're only allowed to allocate up to 50% of excess reserves. So an example of that is if you have $1 million in ETH, you can allocate up to $500,000 in ETH. So really what we are sort of backed up on was the sort of engineering, right? There are some governance proposals that are going to be coming out. So we're going to have Anchor, ETH staking, Yearn. I forgot the other one. Oh, StakeDAO and Ribbon as well. So there's like multiple different protocols that are going to be kind of like coming out to be whitelisted. We will allocate funds to that once approved by governance. And we can do that. There's also going to be now pretty soon we are starting to allocate funds across multiple chains. So as you know, like Olympus Pro has been operating on multiple chains for a while now. So you have farming of that happening at the same time. And everything is being locked for max capacity, right? So it's kind of, a huge like octopus, if you will, that's growing in so many different directions, all over the place, and in like just a massive amounts of incoming at any given time. Not to mention the massive amount of incubator, right? So like take for instance Vesta as an example. Vesta, once we get 6% of the token supply, we're just going to supply it to the stability pool, and then we get all that returned, right? And then on top of that, there's more protocols coming out that should sort of further produce buying pressure for Ohm. And there's a lot of interesting conversations internally. Like one I just left, Zeus was in like a policy chat yesterday for like 6 hours, just sort of like brain dumping a lot of interesting things that I can't talk about, but good things for the good things for good things for the Treasury. It's just, it's at the end of the day, right? Like he put it very quite simply, like we've already kind of won. We have, I think a lot of people don't realize that DeFi at the end of the day is just sort of like a player versus player scenario of who can sort of manipulate, control, or own the majority of liquidity. And it's
Yeah.
always about liquidity. A lot of
Yeah.
DeFi is just trying to make
Very
one equal
PvP.
one, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just a circle jerk of stable coins forever. And the only solution is we need to unpeg ourselves from that. And Ohm helps us to do that. And the more that Ohm reaches critical mass, Ohm and Olympus become this like it can do all of DeFi because it owns its own liquidity. It can be everything, and when it can be everything, it can have the maximum amount of extractable value from everything, and do everything in a way that is sustainable and is not pegged to the traditional world. Because you have fucking the free financial world pegged to dollar stable coin. It doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense. It's completely worthless. So really dope stuff going on. I actually might be able to show you a sneak peek of the dashboard, maybe.
I wish we could. It doesn't seem there's a way to share the screen on a stage.
We could just take a screenshot of it and
Yeah,
dump
put
it
a couple
and
screenshots
do
in the
it.
chat,
I'm
maybe.
I'm actually looking at it right now. I mean,
Yeah, but then
it
it would
seems
be in
great.
there forever.
It looks like, you've got an income view, you've got a farming view, these revenue and bonding agreements, like a pro breakdown, which I think is really cool. Because the thing with pro is they're just constantly like dumping all of those tweets out there, and Colton's working his ass off to get all these tweets out there about all the new things that we're doing with pro, and it's like you forget about them because then just more happen, and then more happen, and then more happen. So it's nice
I'm
to see them
just
all on a dashboard.
I'm just
Oh yeah,
bullish also seeing the daily bond capacities, like
Yeah.
how much people are buying every day. It's quite
Oh yeah.
incredible.
And like Zeus talks in like really, very long-winded, like kind of like 10,000-foot view terms sometimes. Like, so for example, like when Jason was saying like player versus player, he means PvP for most people who don't know what that means. And that it's a PvP thing, but for those that don't know, PvP is player versus player.
yeah. It's kind of like it's the zero sum game, right? If you look
Yeah,
at
that's when
options,
zero is zero.
right? If you look at options, right, it's the best sort of non-inflationary way of a distribution of wealth, right? I honestly think the WAGMI title is very nice, but at the end of the day, like the reality is that you want to be a part of that winning side because there has to be a distribution of wealth somewhere. And in the traditional world, the people who have the greatest amount of control and leverage within the sort of financial ecosystem and sort of structure and framework are the ones that control the most liquidity or have or as close to that flow of liquidity as possible. And that's just like you look at Olympus and you see like $500 million, but like in the year, 2 years, or 3 years, it's going to be multiples of billions. And then, Olympus can leverage the treasury in just massive ways. Like even today, we're having discussions of like we could we could guide things and we could manipulate things and we can do whatever we want because we own the entire market. We are our own market, period. And
Mhm.
that because of that, you unlock a lot of interesting things. And it's not priced in yet. So for me, it's fine. Like it's difficult to sometimes communicate the value of it. But um, it's people just
Well,
truly, they just don't
this
get
is
it.
the reason why the dashboard's being created, right? Because sometimes I think people, like, to me, the selling point of Olympus, I'm maybe a little more pragmatic than some other people, but like to me, it's the value of the treasury, right? So like if the treasury is strong, Olympus is strong. And so I think what'll happen is when people have this dashboard in their hands, they're going to say like, okay, wow, like, they're getting a percentage of this network, and this network is growing. I want to be here.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's in the if you look at a company, right, in a traditional sense,
Yeah.
and you say, okay, well, we look at this company, you're trying to find the fair valuation of a company. There's these metrics that you look at, right? Competitive analysis, revenue, overhead, blah 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 blah, right? And you say, okay, well, the fair value, I think the fair value for this stock is X per X price. If you look at that in the same capacity as Ohm, where you have a company or an entity that is earning $1 billion plus in annualized revenue, but has a market cap of 500 million, you would think, wow, this is really undervalued, right? So I think that there's a disconnect, there's a cognitive dissonance in terms of trying to understand the true valuation of what Ohm should be versus like the capabilities that Ohm, and people are just sort of sleeping on the capabilities of Ohm in my mind, because it's all about liquidity at the end of the day. And Ohm is perfectly primed and positioned to leverage the massive amounts of liquidity. And that's both from a Olympus Pro revenue perspective, a bonding revenue perspective, a treasury perspective. Because like, for example, we're going to go onto Curve and we're going to have our own ETH pool on Curve. We're going to own all that own liquidity. We have almost 1% of the total supply of CVX. We'll just vote for our own gauge, and then we'll produce $20 million of risk-free value and revenue.
Yeah.
Boom.
I just wanted to address a quick question in the chat. Dom asked a good question. He says, since the Treasury is the most important thing, why would we deplete it via inverse bonds? Quick note on inverse bonds, because I do like the bonds. The inverse bonds are meant to support a liquid backing. So the idea is basically that when the price goes under liquid backing, every inverse bond that is sold increases liquid backing, right? So your intrinsic value of each Ohm token is greater. I would say that why we would do it, why we would deplete the treasury, is that we aren't depleting the treasury. That the treasury is taking in so much revenue that we can do inverse bonds and
You're
support.
actually increasing backing per coin
Yeah.
every time you do that, which is incredible if you think about it. It's actually a
I
really good deal
I
for the
I
treasury.
actually think it's great. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, because buybacks, at the end of the day, buybacks don't work. They don't.
No.
And like that's a problem. Some people will say, well, we should just, buy back Ohm and burn it. That's literally not what you should that's not what you should do, right? Like you don't necessarily want a decreasing supply. Um, there is a way that you can burn some Ohm depending on how you approach it, but even if the treasury, like the whole point of the intervention is to leverage the massive amounts of liquidity that Olympus owns to protect its what the protocol feels is its fair valuation.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it's going to do, and that is why we have so much liquidity, right? So it's not like, oh, we're going to just empty the crap out of our treasury to protect a price, because then the market will challenge that price and they will use that as exit liquidity. That
Real
is not
quick,
Good.
we have one more person that I want to get to, but before
Yeah,
we
my bad.
do, just a quick question. Is it true that we're going to be merging with, everybody ready? With Bitcoin? That Bitcoin is buying us?
What? Who said that?
No?
He's asked if it was
Is that
true or
you?
not.
Is that you?
Is it true? We all want to know. Is Bitcoin.com buying us?
Cryptocurrency.com.
Is Matt Damon? I'll shut up now. We have one more guest
Yes.
that we want to get to.
Connor works with Gitcoin, and Gitcoin is kind of capping off the last of the grant program's initial cohort. I kind of just want to give him some time to talk about the program that they're running and talk about the grants integration.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. And
Cheers.
yeah, super cool to hear Bitcoin is buying Olympus DAO.
You heard it here,
We
folks.
found Satoshi.
Yeah, Bitcoin's my favorite meme coin, so
That's true.
it's cool that they're
Got a dog.
innovating now.
It's got a dog on it. I love it.
But yeah, so I'm Connor. I've been working at Gitcoin for a few years, been in the ETH space for much longer. But yeah, Gitcoin, we basically have a platform to fund open source and get developers paid. And I guess I can start kind of from square one. Like, do you think most people here have heard of Gitcoin or are fairly new to it?
I think some have. Maybe just give a bit of a background.
Yeah, totally. So what we're doing with Olympus is we're doing a $50,000 grants matching round. And what we're probably most known for is Gitcoin Grants, which is our quadratic funding protocol. We also have a bounties platform. We do hackathons, incubators, etc. But what we probably get the most attention for, and we launched a DAO around it, is our grants product. So this started like 3 years ago. We use this idea of quadratic funding, which was actually kind of pioneered by Vitalik and Glenn Whale. And it's very similar to quadratic voting, where people can donate to support projects, but the amount of individual donors actually matters more than the amount they donate in terms of calculating the match that that donation receives. So an easy way to think about it, and from the quadratic sense, is like two people donating $5 to a project will earn the same match as one person donating $25. So it's kind of like a more democratic oriented way of funding public goods and open source projects. So we started doing these grants matching rounds. They last 2 weeks. We do one per quarter. And in the early days, it was really just based, it was like Ethereum, public goods. So people working on, like protocol research, early stage dApps, things like that. And we had these small matching rounds. And actually, some of like the earliest grantees that we've had that have now grown a lot are now giving back to the matching pool. So like Uniswap was an early grantee, ENS, EPNS, a bunch of others as well. So anyone can open up a grant. It goes through an approval process. If it is, can be seen as an open source project, a public good, it is approved. And then anyone can donate to grants that they want to support, and it earns a match from the matching pool that we raise. And so the first matching pool was like 25K. The last round 12 we did in December was like $3 million total. And what we're now trying to do is use this mechanism to apply it to a bunch of different ecosystems and causes. So in grants round 12, we did these ecosystem rounds with Uniswap, Polygon, Synthetics, where they put up their own matching pool. People working on projects within those ecosystems can open grants, and they earn a match based on the amount of community donations. We've also done some rounds for like climate change, for longevity. We're actually doing a Ukraine aid round in this upcoming grants round, which I can talk about in a second. But we're doing one with olympusdao. And basically, you guys just launched your grants program, which is awesome. The kind of issue that we see with a lot of grants programs is that they're fairly centralized. Like it's usually one group that's deciding what's approved, where the funds go. And this is basically a complement to a traditional grants program where the community gets to decide what they find valuable and what they want to fund. So I guess there's a lot to it. I'll drop some links in the chat. But anyone who's working on a project within the Olympus ecosystem can open up a grant on Gitcoin. The round starts March 9th, runs for 2 weeks. And basically, we want to get other people in your community, in your ecosystem to donate to projects that they want to support. And via this quadratic funding mechanism, like a $1 donation might earn, a $30 or $40 or $50 match from the matching pool. So it's a low bar to buy in from the donor perspective, but it's really about signaling about what you find valuable in your ecosystem and what you want to fund.
Thank you very much. I'm getting
Really cool.
pinged. I'm so sorry. We have to turn over to the community call. But Connor, maybe if you just want to stay in the chat a little bit and talk or drop some links, that would be appreciated, and we could do something in the future with you guys. But we really appreciate Gitcoin. You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
Just thanks so much for coming out, everybody. We'll have another one of these soon. It was a lot of fun. Happy 3-3 day. Also want to give a little bit of a quick alpha shout out. Odyssey is going to be doing an airdrop. Oop, did I just say that?
What?
Yeah.
What do I have to
and
do?
I'll post it very soon, all the details, but it'll be it'll be an NFT airdrop, and it's going to act as your gateway to the marketplace. So more details to come.
Do I have to own Ohm V1?
You have to have owned Ohm since June onwards, and I think
I can do that.
all of us will
I can do that.
All right. All right, everybody. With that final crescendo, I'm going to close it down and hand it over. Stick around for the community call.
Thank you, Boss Imp. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Boston.
Jason.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks,
My
Connor.
pleasure.
Connor.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
that I'm going to confirm that this is in the works. That's like the biggest budget project of the DAO.